Every angler starts somewhere. Today's episode takes you inside of a live seminar, my first ever, where we broke down everything it takes to get started in fly fishing: the gear, the bugs, the tactics, and how to do it all responsibly. This one's for the newcomers, but I promise even the veterans will find something worth hearing. Welcome to Flying Trout, a podcast about chasing wild places, reading the water, and all the stories that happen in between. Whether you're new to the outdoors or you've been wading these rivers and walking these ridgelines your whole life, this is a place for people who love the pursuit just as much as the catch. Now, today's episode is going to be just a little different. What you're about to hear is a recording of a live seminar I had the chance to present recently at the Shields in Johnstown. Fair warning, some of the audience questions may be tough to hear, but I think the content comes through really clear. All right, you ready? Let's get into it.
Telling a couple of my friends before we started over here that I don't know, I'm feeling super appreciative. I've wanted to teach a fly fishing seminar like this since I was about yay high and 12 years old, and so it's really cool that like people that I don't know actually showed up. I'm kind of like shocked right now. So thank you all for coming. Appreciate it a lot. Who in here has like never fly fished before in their life? Awesome. That is incredible. Love that. Anybody call themselves like intermediate fly fishing? Love that. Anybody kind of at that super advanced level? Don't raise your hand. That's perfect. I'm hoping that kind of all the groups can kind of take a little bit out of this. My kind of presenting style, if you will. I don't like hearing myself talk the whole time. I get tired of it. I'm sure you guys get tired of it. So if you guys have a question or want me to go deeper on something or anything like that, like raise your hand. Let's talk about it. I want this to kind of be more of a conversation. I also have a tendency to overdevelop PowerPoints. And so there's a lot of stuff in here that we might get through it all, we might not, but I think more if we can just kind of open up the conversation, we'll be in a good spot. So tonight we're going to kind of go over like the gear, bugs, and tactics that have made me successful on the water. I've spent a long time fly fishing, and I think there's a few things that I've learned that I really like to pass along, no matter the skill level. But that, of course, brings up the question is, who is this kid sitting in front of you and telling you about fly fishing? Well, hi, my name is Braden. I host a small podcast called the Flying Trout Podcast. I've been fishing since I was about 10 years old. Before that, we lived in Oklahoma, and I fished bass and things like that since before I can even like remember any cognitive thoughts besides, fish. So that was kind of like my upbringing. Moved all the way out from Oklahoma, all the way came out to northern New Mexico, and ended up in a really cool spot where we fished the San Juan River, which if you ever heard about it, it's as magical as everybody tells you it is. You can catch these crazy trout that are like 2 feet long and just like massive. They're just all over the place. But it's also very tricky because these 2 feet long trout will just like hang out like right next to your leg and just like not even care that you're there because they're so used to people fishing on them. And so you kind of end up in this super pressured situation. So you have to learn a lot of things. And that was kind of where I caught my first trout and developed that sort of skill set. But at the end of the day, I really like to say I'm just a guy who likes trout. Like my wife right here can tell you. She has to deal with me saying trout, talking about trout almost all the time. And so really at the end of the day, that's just who I am. So getting going here, I mean, why trout, right? Like why each of you saw like a fly fishing class was going to kind of talk about trout, and there's all sorts of different things you can do with it. But like, why do you guys want to fish for trout?
They're pretty.
They are pretty. They are very pretty, right? Like I've got some of my favorite catches that I've ever had up here. Greenback cutthroats, if you know much about them, they're probably my favorite, most pretty trout to catch. Super fun. For me, at the end of the day, really catching trout is all down to the places that it takes us, right? When I'm talking about brown trout, when I'm targeting brown trout, I've gotten to go to some of these crazy like mountain meadows where you got like these crazy peaks up around you and you've got this nice meandering stream around and they'll just hide underneath those undercut banks. It's super fun. For brook trout are one of my favorite things to catch of all time because you go into these like high alpine areas. They're super far away from anything. You have to backpack into them, all these crazy things, and you end up in just some really, really cool situations. Rainbow trout, I feel like are kind of slept on all the time because they do stock them a lot, but For a lot of what I'm going to talk about, we're talking about wild fish, right? These are fish that are bred in the system, brought up in the system. And so that's really what I'm going to talk about. And I mean, really, natural rainbow trout landscape is one of the coolest things ever. And we have some really great areas up here on the Poudre River and on the Big Thompson River of just these awesome cascading, waterfall-y sort of pocket areas that hold a lot of rainbow trout. And cutthroat trout, I mean, you can't beat going up to an alpine lake and catching these cutthroat trout in these areas that are so high up in the alpine that, I mean, you can hardly believe it. So for me, that's really what it comes down to, is it's about getting out and getting disconnected into these places that's just wild and natural and free. And so that's really what brings me to trout. So how do we catch them, right? That's kind of like what we have to get to. And I do think there's a little bit of gear that we need. I'm sure all of you have gear opinions. Am I right? Yes, of course. All fly fishermen have gear opinions, and believe me, I could give you a book long. And so I want to kind of keep this a little bit more simple. And I put this on all those cheat sheets down there in front of you. But just kind of a little bit more simple of really, if you're going to start out, for all those people in here that raise their hand that have never fished before, it's kind of like a checkbox of like, what do we need before we can get out on the water? The other thing is fly fishing can be pretty expensive, right? I don't even want to talk about, don't laugh. I don't want to talk about how many thousands of dollars of fly gear I just have sitting in the closet somewhere. So I do want to talk a little bit about just how we can kind of make that a little bit more cheaper, what I would kind of recommend going more cheap on, what I'd recommend spending more money on, because there are a few things that I think it's worth it. What's the first thing you think you need to fish? A license. I didn't include a license. Oh no. Anybody in here a game warden? Okay, we'll be okay for now. Yes, we do need a license. The first thing I always think of though is a rod, right? We need a rod, we need a reel, we need fly line. And there are a ton of choices. If you go out on the sales floor over there and you see that little fly shop they have, I mean, they probably have 100 rods, and that can be pretty hard to break it down. And believe me, I'll tell you that I have my opinions on rods and manufacturers, and I'm sure some of the people that raise their hand that are advanced fishing people will absolutely agree, and we'll probably disagree, and we don't need to spend the time getting in a fight. He's nodding his head back there. So 100% we don't need to do that. But rod, reel, line, I think the best way to do it from a beginner fly standpoint is a combo set. It's just easy. It's already spooled for you. It's ready to go. I'm going to recommend a 9-foot 5-weight. Just out of the gate, 9-foot 5-weight. You can do just about everything on a fly rod. You can catch trout, you can catch bass, you can catch all sorts of things. 9-foot 5-weight, and there's a few different ways you can go. Here they do carry the Shields Outfitters combo set. It's $150, and that's going to get you a rod, a reel, and line. Get you out on the water. $150 is not that bad, especially in a market where we're talking about the new Orvis Helios that came out last year, cost upwards of $1,000. I don't know about you, but even me as somebody who's fished since the age of 10, I can't really justify a $1,000 fly rod at this point in my life, but a $150 fly rod will get you out there. If you want to go for a little bit more, I still use this rod to this day. It's one of my favorite rods actually, but TFO makes a combo set called the Pilot set. It's $279. It gets you a really nice rod that is way better than the $279 price tag on it. It gets you a reel that is really, really, really very decent. And it gets you, I think it comes pre-spooled with Rio fly line, which is still my favorite fly line. And so really this is going to get you across the board a really nice rod that, like I said, I have a bunch of rods. What do I have now? 4 or 5 rods, 6 rods, something like that. Number keeps going up every time I look in my closet. It's a little scary, but I still will pull this one out from day to day and have a really awesome day on the water. So enough said on combo sets. Next thing is going to be waders and boots. And this is one where I'm going to tell you, you can cheap out on the waders. I would not recommend cheaping out on boots. I actually made this mistake this past year. I had a like $300 pair of boots that crapped out on me after like 5 years of use, and the bottoms ripped off of them. And I was just kind of in a point where like Christmas was coming up, and I was like, okay, I don't really want to spend a ton of money on boots. And so I bought a cheap like $100 pair of boots. I have never fallen in a river in my life until the last few months, where I have fallen 7 times in a row into a river in the middle of winter. Even this fake winter that we're having right now, it's still very cold. And it's all because I just cheaped out on the boots. There's not enough ankle support there. So it is something that I'm going to recommend you spend a little bit of more money on. On those guys, I would say like a $300 price point isn't unreasonable for a boot. My favorite, I'm going to go for a Corker's boot pretty much every time, because they have an interchangeable sole system on the bottom that's going to save you money in the long run. And so you'll actually be able to take those soles off and switch them out for a different sole instead of having to get a new boot when that sole is kind of cooked on that one. Waders, I think you can find a cheap pair of waders for like $50 on Facebook Marketplace. You can find them all over the place for pretty reasonably expensive. But if you want to spend good money on one, Simms does make a tributary wader. It's about $300. It's a really good wader that'll last a long time. There are some kind of questions, I'll be 100% honest with you, about kind of Simms durability right now. So you might look at an Orbis or something like that as well. But I'll say I have a Simms pair of waders that I've been using for the last 6 years, and they've worked very well for me so far. But don't cheap out on the boots. I just promise it's not worth it. Boot I'm going to recommend, they have a men's and a women's. It's called the Corker's Dark Horse. So this is $229 actually, so a little cheaper than what I said. And this is a very nice boot for the price. And it's going to get you around there. It's nice and stiff, so you're going to get lots of ankle support. And hopefully you're not going to fall into the river as much as I did. So that's what I hope for all of you. Okay, now listen to me. Packs are a whole deal. There may be even worse than fly rods and fly line and reels and all that. There's going to be so many opinions. I know I have my opinions. I'm sure you have your opinions on what kind of pack you like to use. And so I'm not going to dive too deep into what you can actually do. Instead, I'm just going to tell you the kinds of packs that you could use and why you might. So there are lumbar packs where it's kind of like a belt system that sits at your back. Think like really technical fanny pack. That's exactly what it is. We just like to call it a lumbar pack instead of a fanny pack because it sounds cooler. Those are really, really nice. Not my preference, but you can get a lumbar pack all over the place. You can go for a vest. I love a vest. I'm going to be honest. They're nice. They're versatile. You can use them for just about anything and everywhere. And they have a ton of pockets. Like I just like having all of my many, many, many pockets. Okay, maybe we can agree. We're good. Yes. Okay. You can use a backpack, which I'm kind of a guy that backpack can go with any other pack. And so I really like using a backpack for all sorts of stuff, especially for storing layers, storing extra gear, all that sort of stuff. I can just throw that right in the backpack. Colorado weather can also be pretty temperamental, so packing some extra layers into this nice backpack can be very, very nice. Sling packs are probably the most popular thing on the market. Again, not my preference, because you kind of have to like move it around and shake it around your entire body, and it kind of gets a little, I don't know, tiresome for me over time. But they are probably the most popular pack out there at the moment. You see them on the water all the time. Chest pack is my new love. I'm sorry, I know we bonded on vests, but I just bought a chest pack and I'm actually in love with it. It's very nice just to have everything just right there in the chest pack. So it's a really good pack as well. And then lastly is going to be these new like crazy belt systems they've come out with. I'm going to be honest, I'm just not smart enough for this one. There's like 7 buckles and I just don't understand like how everything is attaching here. But I've heard some really good things about them and just the weight distribution they have. If you're 100% new, starting out fly fishing, I'm just going to recommend you get a cheap vest. You can get one of these for $20. They are prevalent everywhere. They've probably got some out on the floor over here that are very nice and reasonable and affordable for you guys. But there's a ton of other packs here. I'll also tell you that when you're ready to spend money on a pack, buy Fish Pond packs. I'm not like sponsored or endorsed by Fish Pond in any way. I have to say that. I just own way too much of their gear. But I'll tell you that they do very well in taking care of their customers. I lost the net one time because their net release that I had broke, and the net was not theirs at all. It was an old net that my dad gave me when I was a kid. And I just sent them an email and said, hey, I lost this net. Can you just replace like the confluence thing that broke? It was a defect. They sent me a net release and a $300 hand net for free. I paid nothing because one $20 product broke on them. And so they bought my loyalty from day one. So now I'll spend like hundreds of dollars on all their gear and packs and accessories and all sorts of stuff. So it's the best. You'll probably get a free fish pond thing. I mean, how many of you picked up off the river? 2? Yeah. Mine was not nice that I lost. It was like, I think my dad probably bought it at Walmart when I was like 8 years old and gave it to me. So I hope you enjoy the net though. It's really good. That's awesome. Fly box is again one of those things that can get really complicated and everybody has opinions now on like inserts and everything. Guys, it's not that complicated. It's to hold supplies, right? Like we don't have to spend $100 on a fly box. There's some $20 options. You could even just, if you go pick up some flies off the floor in there, they're going to give you like this little like plastic cup, you can just use that. Like that works fine for a fly box. But if you want to go expensive, this is the one I use. It's the Umpqua, I think that's how you say it, Umpqua fly box. It has a little magnetic thing because I don't know if you guys can see me. I'm a little bit of a bigger guy, right? The tiny, like trying to get my like size 24 flies into these tiny little foam slots is just never going to happen for me. So I just like having this little magnet pad and I just like throw it on there and like forget about it. And it's awesome. So magnet's awesome. If you want to go cheap again, you can go like 10 bucks for one of just these like Shields Outfitters. Nice little fly box will get you by. So, all right, nets. Like I said, I am way into my $300 fly fishing nets, but I did not pay for it. So you can't hold me to that too much. Again, net's one of those things you don't need to overthink, but there are a couple of considerations you want to do with this. A lot of the cheaper nets are going to have this kind of cotton nylon-y material for the net. It's actually very harmful for fish. It's really harmful for them. It'll take the slime off of the outside of a trout and then actually hurts a trout survivability a ton. So you can get a cheaper net, but make sure that it's one of those nicer silicone net baskets. Again, they have some out there that are a Shields Outfitters brand that are like 10, 15 bucks. They're very nice and they have that nylon net. If you want to go expensive, again, I'm going to say Fish Pond. I don't need to hop back up on that high horse, but I am very, very much into their nets. They're very cool. So yeah, you could spend everywhere from $30 all the way up to, I mean, I think this Sims net is like 190 bucks. So more than I would recommend spending on a pair of waders for a net is kind of nuts, but it's kind of the market we live in today. It's very cool. And then there's some last little things that we're going to need to put in that pack that you guys are going to need. And I included all these on your little cheat sheets there, but these are kind of the things that are just going to help you out on the water, make things easier. So of course we're going to need leader. For those of you who don't know, who are like just starting out fly fishing, your leader is what takes you from your fly line, and it's going to taper you down to your tippet or to your fly. And so it's just something that you're going to connect to that fly line, and it just helps transfer the power from the fly line out to the fly. If you just connected your fly to your fly line, it'd slap on the water, and then all of a sudden, all the fish that are in like a quarter mile are just going to like run away from you. It's never going to happen, right? So we want to transfer some of that energy out to get a nice clean cast. So we're going to use a leader. Tippet material is really just to cap off the end of a leader. So however long you want your leader, you're just going to add tippet to the end of that. There are two different kinds of tippet that I'm going to recommend. It's fluorocarbon and nylon, and you're going to want both of them. It's not like an either or situation. Fluorocarbon is going to be for anything that you're going to use subsurface. So think nymphs, streamers, anything like that. If it's going below the water, you want a fluorocarbon because it has a really great sink rate. On the other hand, if you're using dry flies, we're going to want to go for a nylon tippet because that's actually going to help that fly stay on the surface of the water because nylon has a tendency to float instead of sink. And so that nylon tippet, there's a lot of people I've talked to on the water that they're having some big frustrations with their dry flies staying on the surface of the water. You switch them over to nylon tippet and all of a sudden they're catching fish, and it's awesome to just have like that quick of a fix. It's probably my favorite thing ever. It makes me look like a wizard and it's awesome. So nylon and fluorocarbon have both. This isn't like a hard set rule. This is just what I carry. But in both of these, I'll carry a 3X, 4X, 5X, and 6X. There are a lot of people who are going to recommend going down to a 7X tippet. I've absolutely used 7X tippet. I will use 7X tippet, but I don't think it's necessary. The biggest reason you're going to hear that people use it is that trout get tippet shy. And I think there's a lot of other considerations that we need to take into effect before we think about a trout getting scared of a tiny little line of tippet. It's a hot opinion I have, but I will die on that hill. So I tend to go for 3X, 4X, 5X, and 6X for when it's really, really hard. But I have a tendency also to use the biggest size of tippet that trout will let me get away with. If I can fish a 4X tippet all day long, I am a happy boy because that means less fly changes. It means less breakage. It means all of these things. It's really, really easy for me. So 4X tippet is kind of my sweet spot right there for just about everything. I just got into these like a year ago, and I'm like, I will preach to the moon. Tippet rings are one of the things that have made me so much more effective on the water. What a tippet ring is, for those of you who don't know, is it's this tiny little ring that's like 2 millimeters wide that you can connect from your leader to your tippet and just sits right there in between. So now instead of having to sit there and attach my tippet to my leader using typically like a double surgeon's knot, I can just tie a clinch knot onto the end of my leader, that then goes onto a tippet ring, and then I can tie a clinch knot to attach the tippet to that tippet ring, and it means less changes for me on the water. And if I want to switch from a tippet size, I can do it extremely quickly. Now I don't have to sit there and cut off a surgeon's knot. My leader then keeps getting shorter. My leader will stay at the same length all the time. The arguments against them is, again, that trout will get scared of them. I have never once seen it. I have never once switched. I do a lot of switching on the water from different techniques to see what's working and what's not working. I have been catching trout on no tippet ring and switched over to a tippet ring, and I have had no effect on my fishing. And I have had very slow days where I'm using a tippet ring and I've switched to not using a tippet ring, and it hasn't made my day any better, unfortunately. I wish I could say it did and caught more fish, but that's just the truth of it. So truly, I would not be scared of a tippet ring. I would just say get the smallest size tippet ring possible. 2 millimeters is kind of my ideal. I've been on the hunt to see if somebody will manufacture me a 1 millimeter tippet ring, but nobody's brave enough to do that. And I don't even know if they did send them to me, if I could even find them once they did, because it'd be too small. But tippet rings have been a true game changer for me. The other thing you're going to need is some form of indicator. And again, there's lots of opinions out there. I use a lot of like wool indicators. It's just a tiny little thing of like wool yarn. Sorry, honey, for stealing all your yarn. I'll take those just right off there, and I just tie on a little bit of wool onto my leader or tippet, and that works really, really well. But from a beginner standpoint, I'm going to highly recommend an Oros indicator. They sell a bunch of them out there, but they're probably the easiest indicator to use on the market for anybody, and they come in a variety of sizes. I like carrying an extra small, a small, and a medium, but these things are super cool because they just twist apart, and it's like two little foam pieces, and they just twist apart, and then you put line right in the middle of it, twist that Oros indicator back on, and it's attached to your fly line. Those of you who have never had to deal with like thingamabobbers and like these little foam sticky things that just get stuck to my fingers every time I try to put them on won't understand like how big of a deal that is, but it truly is. Oros indicators are probably my favorite thing that is on the fly fishing market right now. So other just small things we're going to need. You're going to need a set of nippers. It's just a clip line. Don't overthink it. You can get one for $5. Not a huge deal. Forceps, I'm very fancy because I have a mother who's a nurse, and so when she's done with her forceps from using them in like a hospital, she just hands them off to me. So I have very fancy doctor's forceps, and it makes me feel really cool. But you can get some fly fishing specific ones for super cheap as well. And then you need dry fly floatant. There's a ton of different stuff you can use here between the spray on stuff that has aerosol in it. They make little dips that you can dip a fly line in. They even make a little dry shake that you can put in. I've used all of them. There's a lot of talk about the spray on one saying that like the aerosol gets down into the river and, you know, affects the water quality. There's no studies that actually show that, so I wouldn't feel bad about using those at all. I tend to use a dry fly shake because I'm just not patient enough for anything to dry on my dry fly. Because I don't know if you guys have ever fished, those of you who have fished for rising trout, can you wait while a trout rises right in front of you? Absolutely not. I'm like the biggest fool in the world. I've done this for years. I'm sitting there and I'm flocking. It's just crazy time. But when I'm out there and I'm trying to sit there and wait for this like aerosol stuff to dry on this fly, because you have to wait like 30 seconds and it doesn't seem that long, but you're watching trout come up in front of you. It's terrible. So I just go for the dry fly shake. I can throw it in there, shake it off, and I'm fishing again. So any questions on that? I know that was kind of like a lot of information on gear. Again, I could talk fly fishing gear for eons, and I just don't want to bore anybody. It's kind of late, so I might put you to sleep. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I don't know if I recommend any like knot tying tools, to be honest with you. I've never tried a ton of them. I'll show you guys here later, kind of like my rigging methods. And the really wonderful thing about the way that like I have found to rig my fly rod is I only have to tie one knot, and it's amazing, and that's all I need. And so I'll kind of go over that knot at the end, but I don't have any tools. Maybe you do, but yeah, I don't have anything specific. So cool. Okay, you guys are gonna have to deal with me for a second, all right? We're gonna talk about entomology, and like I can be a huge bug nerd. We're talking about getting me little like specimen discs to sit at my desk of bugs. So that's the kind of guy you're dealing with right now, so I'm sorry. But who in here feels like they really have an understanding of like all of the entomology that deals with aquatic insects that trout eat? Wonderful. I love it. I'm going to sound very smart then. It's good. No, I'm going to try to simplify this as much as I can because I know that this can be really overwhelming. For me, I fished for a long, long time, and I didn't truly understand fly fishing entomology to a point where I felt comfortable with it until I started tying flies, and that made a huge difference. We're not really going to dive into tying flies tonight because that would be a whole nother hour that you guys would have to deal with me, and that would just be terrible. So instead, we're going to kind of simplify this and just talk a little bit about the different bugs you really need to know. Okay. So first off, there's really two different sections of insects we kind of need to think about. Okay. The first is bugs that do what's called an incomplete metamorphosis. So this is where they go from an egg stage and then they go straight into a nymphal stage. And then when they're ready to go, they go immediately up to the surface and they hatch into what's called an adult. And so they're going to go straight to the surface. That's really going to be your mayflies and your stoneflies. Okay. The second type that we're going to have here, these are what go over a complete metamorphosis. So they're going to go from an egg stage, then they're going to go to a larval stage, then a pupa stage, and then they're going to go to the adult. So there's just more area where we're going to tackle through that life cycle. It also gives you more patterns that you can typically carry for these bugs. And these type of bugs tend to be more prevalent in the water system. So if you're having like a slow day, midges and caddisflies are going to be something that's going to be in your river system year round, floating through the water column, which isn't necessarily true for mayflies and stoneflies. Have I lost anybody yet? Okay, good, good. Okay, so that's kind of the down and dirty on metamorphosis. We won't kind of tackle that anymore. So we're going to start with mayflies. Mayflies kind of have a ton of real estate in the fly fishing industry. I mean, there are t-shirts and there are people with tattoos, and I'm probably going to get a mayfly tattoo. People just love mayflies, and I can't blame them. They are like the coolest bug ever. And they also create these really amazing hatches. If you ever get to be during like a blue wing olive or a green drake hatch, it is one of the coolest things of all time. Like you will have a blast. But there's really two sections that we're going to deal with. We're going to deal with dry flies and nymphs. And I'm just going to give you guys two patterns to keep it nice and simple on what I carry day to day, what you should throw in your box. I'll also tell you with flies, I tend to be a little bit more of a kind of a generalist. I don't go with patterns that are super, super specific to a certain water column or a certain river system or anything like that. I use flies that tend to work everywhere, and then I'll vary the colors just slightly, if that makes sense. So dry flies, on these guys, I'm going to recommend a parachute Adams. I carry them in everything from a size 12 to a size 20, and they can cover the gambit. I mean, these guys will cover just about any hatch you can do in just terms of size and color. If you just switch those two things up, you can get almost anything, anytime fish are rising off the top. I switch that up with a classic Adams from time to time. The biggest difference on these guys, I don't know if you can see it on there, a parachute Adams is tied with these hackle fibers that sit up above the hook, and that helps it just sit a little bit nicer on the water column. On the other side, classic Adams has the hackling wrapping around the hook shank, and so it has a tendency that the back of this fly will sometimes sink and put that hook down to the bottom of the water. And that sounds like it's a disadvantage, but sometimes it's not. For instance, if I'm having a situation where I'm getting trout that are coming up and they're actively eating off the top, but I'm not quite hooking them on my parachute, I might drop them down to a classic Adams and have that hook just barely sink down. It's not quite at what they call an emerger status, which we'll talk about here with a couple of other flies, but it gets pretty close. So in terms of nymphs, man, I'm just a sucker for a classic pheasant tail. Like, you can't beat it. I've caught so many trout on this fly, it's ridiculous, and it's not overcomplicated it at all. I carry this in two different versions. One is what's pictured here. It's got a little bead head on the front of it. And so that bead is just going to weight it down a little bit. I'll vary the bead size, the bead color, all sorts of things. But that bead head nymph is going to be great. The other side of this is you can also do it without a bead head, where it just has the front of it's just the hair, the fur that whoever tied it uses on the front of that. That doesn't have any bead on there. And that's really cool because then it'll sit a little bit higher in the water column. It's great for a dry dropper rig where you tie a dropper nymph onto the end of a dry. And that's really fun because then you can catch fish in two different zones, which is just like the coolest thing ever. So that's another way you could take it. And then this is probably like my greatest love and greatest secret on the river is these flies called perdigons. They're immaculately simple, super easy to tie. All it really is a hook, and then it's got a little bit of tail material. You typically will go up it with a quill material or a pheasant tail, and you just wrap up, and then you'll just tie that off with a feather. It's got a little bead head on the front, and then you just put some UV resin on the top of it. You make it nice and slick, but it's probably the fastest dropping fly that I've ever used. We'll talk a little bit more about why that's important later on. But the big thing with that is that it gets a much better sink rate. And so like around here on the Pooter and the Thompson, we deal with a lot of pocket water, right? Like pocket water is everywhere. And you have to get that fly down extremely quickly. Otherwise, your fly is just going to go right over the top of that trout. He's just going to sit there and he's never going to see that fly, even though you're casting to him. And so these perdigons will drop into that water column super fast, and it'll get down to those trout even when you only have a 6-inch gap in order to cast to. So perdigons are huge for me. Stoneflies, on the other hand, are one of maybe the creepiest bugs ever. Any of you that have fished in here, have you ever had stoneflies crawling up your waders? They're huge, and it's crazy. So this is this is a pretty good size one, but this is on somebody's finger. And so you'll see these sometimes during their hatch activity, because these flies hatch a little differently by crawling up onto rocks and then hatching from there as their wings dry. And so I've literally had stoneflies crawling up my legs, and I look down and it's just this big bug on there, and it's like totally freaky. But huge trout also have a tendency of loving stoneflies because they are calorically dense. And so it's super important to carry around some stoneflies, and there's some pretty generalist patterns you can use for these. One of my favorite stoneflies of all time, and this will pop up in another when we talk about terrestrials as well, but a chubby Chernobyl is probably the funnest fly to catch a trout on in the world. It's the only fly I've ever seen a trout chase across a river. It's like you'll cast it in the middle of a river and you'll see this flash come out from like underneath a bank, and a trout will just hammer it. And it's super fun to see. So chubby Chernobyls are gonna be one of my favorites. I'm gonna let you guys in on a little secret. If you can find these with purple foam and purple underneath them, they go even crazier. And so it's super fun. I don't know what it is about purple, but I've been having a ton of success with the color purple. So the other one I love, and this is just a huge classic in the world of fly fishing, is just the stimulator fly. These guys are in probably every fly shop in the world. Super easy to tie, super easy to get after, and they float extremely well. So when we're talking about a dry dropper rig again, these are a great choice because they'll just stay up there and they'll float all day long. You don't have to worry about them sinking at all. In terms of nymphs on these guys, a prince nymph is going to be name of the game. You can probably catch a prince or a trout on a prince nymph in every water in the country, maybe even the world. I've never fished in Patagonia, so if anybody would like to take me to Patagonia to fish and I can try the prince nymph out, I'd be very, very appreciative. But these guys can catch trout anywhere. I carry them in everything from a size 8, which is really big, all the way down to a size 18, which is relatively small. So they kind of run the gambit. My other favorite one that I just started fishing a couple of years ago is a Pat's rubber legs. It's basically just a nymph that has kind of this fuzzy material on the outside, and then you just get this little rubber and put it on the edges, and it gets these nice legs. And trout just tend to love it. It also causes a lot of movement as it goes through the water column, so it'll tend to pull some attraction from those trout that are hiding in deep pools and things like that. So moving on to more of our complete metamorphosis people. We're going to talk about midges, and midges are maybe the most important fly that you can carry in your box. Midges exist in any water that there is a trout in. The midge exists year round. And so it's massive to fish them. They're also extremely tiny. And as I said, I am a larger individual, and I have dropped more flies than I care to admit in rivers and felt horrible about it. But that's just the fact of nature. Dry flies on these guys, you can't beat a Griffiths gnat. I carry in everything from a size 16 all the way down to a 22. So we're getting pretty small here. Mole flies, I kind of talked about that emerger pattern. Mole fly is what I'm going to carry for emerger pattern. Kind of what this is talking about here. You see how the hair is way up here at the top above where you would tie on that hook. So it's way up there. So what's going to happen is that this whole hook is actually going to sit inside of the water column. It's not going to be on top like you would normally have with the dry fly. It's going to be completely submerged. And these CDC feathers are going to barely just hold this into the surface. And trout can go crazy for this. One of the most frustrating things in fly fishing can be being on a water, seeing trout rise and not catching them. If you tie on something like a mole fly, what you might actually see is there's two different ways that trout will eat dries. The first, their mouth will actually come above the surface of the water, and that's when you can catch them on an Adams, a parachute, anything like that. The other way, you won't quite see their mouth come up, but you'll see this swish of their tail flicking the surface of the water. And that's when they're eating emerging insects. And so that's when something like this, a mole fly, can just get you right back into business. I do carry them in everything from a 16 to a 22. That 16 I really use as kind of like a bonus mayfly. Like I said, I like to have a lot of like generalist patterns that can cover the gambit for everything. So that larger 16 can kind of cover my mayfly emerger. And then that 22 is really going to be a great midge pattern for me. In terms of midges, the number one fly you could probably have is a zebra midge. I can't tell you how many trout I've caught with a zebra midge, and I carry them in just about every color of thread that somebody is willing to sell to me. But I carry these in everything from a 16 to a 24. I've even done 28s at some point, so going super, super small. But the zebra midge is going to be a great choice. The RS2 is probably the greatest fly ever invented by mankind. I have caught so many fish on an RS2 on days where I feel like I should not have caught any fish. These guys are very similar to a zebra midge. You just get a little bit of a tail material on the back here and a little bit of a wing case on the top. That's all you get. And you can fish these in a variety of ways. They work as a dry fly if you fish them right. They work as an emerger if you fish them right. And they'll even work as a deep water nymph or midge or anything like that. So caddis are going to be kind of similar to your midges, but you're going to get a little bit bigger size. So on an caddis, I'm going elk hair caddis for the dry fly. These guys are huge, especially on the Thompson. So if you guys are fishing the Thompson around here and not carrying an elk hair caddis, I promise you're probably doing it wrong. There's a huge population of caddis flies in the Thompson. You can pick up any tree branch that's sitting in the river and get a really great science lesson. You'll just pick up like a stick and there's just tons of caddis that are just cased onto the edge of these sticks. It's very gross and very nasty. But if you're into that sort of thing, it's very cool as well. Then you can also do a foam caddis. This is very similar to your elk hair. The only difference is you get a little bit of foam. The reason I like this is that it'll actually help me float just a little bit better, especially in like the pocket water and things that we have around here. In terms of our larva pupa sort of stages, Walt's worm is one of my favorite flies of all time. It's basically just a zebra midge with some dubbing to make it a little bit thicker, a little bit buggier. So the Walt's worm is great. Carry it down to size 24 as well. And then a hare's ear is a great generalist pattern as well. That's going to kind of go for your caddis, but it can also kind of go over to your mayfly category. And I carry that size as 12 to 20. Did I lose anybody on bugs? It's really great to know that like I'm in a room full of people where I can talk about bugs for like 20 minutes and nobody like beats me up. So that's really cool. We'll talk about a couple other flies I like to carry in some other categories. Terrestrials are super fun, especially in the summertime because you end up in these really cool situations where you're getting like grasshoppers falling off into the surface of the water. And that can just be a great time because, again, trout are very opportunistic. And so they'll go after these fish, and it's super fun just to cast one of these flies right underneath a tree branch, and a huge trout will just come up from an underbait and hit them. Chubby Chernobyl, guess what? You don't have to carry any of your patterns. Chubby Chernobyl is going to cover you for stonefly and for your terrestrial. And I carry that in a variety of sizes with that foam. The other one I got into is Stubby Chubby. It's basically a Chubby Chernobyl, but a little smaller. And these guys are very, very good as well. So attractors are maybe one of the funnest things to fish in fly fishing. I hope all you people that have fished before, I hope you don't like run me out of the room here. I got to recommend the Squirmy Wormy. I'm sorry, but it is just an absolute menace on the water, and I've caught a ton of fish on a Squirmy Wormy, and I'm not afraid to admit it. The other thing that I got into last year that's a ton of fun is mouse patterns. This is not a fly that you're going to tie on if you're like, man, I really want to catch a lot of fish today. This is the fly you're going to tie on when you're like, I want to catch one fish today, but I want him to be the biggest fish in the river, and I'm okay with that. So when you want that, you go for a mouse pattern. Those large trout will eat on those, especially early morning hours, like right as the sun is coming up or before, or straight up at evening when it's a little bit darker. So streamers, of course, we have to talk about. You guys who have fished in here before, what is the number one streamer I'm going to recommend? It's got to be the woolly booger. I mean, this fly is just about everywhere, and you can fish it just for everything. So it's all over the place. The other thing I'm going to recommend, and this is one of my favorite flies as well, is just a mini leech. This is tied with some squirrel hair on it. And it's just super small, super nimble. And so for some of the water like we have around here, it's super fun just to fish the squirrel leech. So we're going to quickly go over this. This is a lot of information packed into one slide, but kind of the different things that you're going to focus on fishing during different times of the year. In winter, trout are really focusing on survival and holding in deep pocket water. There's not a ton of bug activity because there's just not a ton of heat, right? Those bugs really need that heat to dry off their wing cases and to get into the system. And so they're looking for that heat. So while they're doing that, you do have some midge hatches that will pop off. So like I said, those zebra midges are key during the winter time. And then sometimes you'll even get a winter hatch. If you're in a weird fake winter like this year, midge hatches happen like every day. And I felt super weird fishing dry fly hatches in January this year. It was so strange. But you can have a ton of fun. They'll also hit streamers in the winter as well, because some of those larger trout are going for more calorically dense meals. Keep an eye out for that. Transitioning into spring, this is maybe my favorite time of year to fly fish, because you really start getting just all of the gambit of bugs. You get mayflies, you get midges, you get stoneflies. So bugs are going to be really active in the system. As you transition into summer, you have all of those same bugs in the system, but now you start to get some terrestrial action going on. So you get grasshoppers and things like that coming off of the tall grass and off of the trees, and they fall into the water, and trout will key in on those, which is a lot of fun. And then in fall and spring are really like fighting for top dog in my mind, because fall is just so fun because you can hit them on streamers a ton, because those trout are trying to fatten up before the winter time comes around. And so streamers during that fall time can just be super fun. But you also get a ton of really awesome caddisfly pops. Like a October caddis is maybe one of the coolest hatches that takes place around this area every year. And so that's something to keep an eye out for too. So did everyone get an okay picture of that? I saw lots of people going for it. So I'll step my big head out of the way. Perfect. Okay, so now we know what we need to fly fish. We know what kind of bugs the trout are feeding on. And now we're going to kind of dive into the tactics. And this is like books and books and books are written on tactics and fly fishing. So we're going to try to simplify this as much as possible. Really for a lot of you guys who are just starting out to be successful in the water, right? That's what I want, is I want you guys to be able to go out, catch a fish on a fly line and have a great time, right? So we're going to try to simplify this as much as possible, but hopefully some of you guys who have fished before and things like that can take something out of it as well. First thing I kind of want to talk about, and I'll just talk about this quickly, is I want to talk about wading. Wading is one of the greatest advantages to fly fishing, because you actually get to be in the body of water that the trout are in, and there's so much advantage to that. You can position yourself in wonderful ways. You can get into these cool spots. Plus, like, I'm just a 10-year-old at heart, and I just love playing in rivers. Like, it's just the heart of it. But there are some considerations you need to know. Safety is a huge thing with wading. For me, I've started using a wading staff pretty frequently, and that has helped me a ton, especially in spring runoff. It's about just around the corner, to just help keep me a little bit more stable in the water so I don't fall in. But really what I want you guys to take away is it's wading, not walking. It's the number one mistake I see on the river that causes people to fall in, is they're walking through the river like you would just walk normally. The problem with that is that once I put my foot here, all of my weight has now transferred onto this foot. Say I put that foot on a rock that's kind of shaky or something like that, that's when I fall into the river. And so that's something I just want to keep an eye out for. Instead, you're going to do like this weird, like, I like to call it like my stealth walk. It's like I'm trying to walk, and I'm trying for my wife not to know that I'm going to eat frosting and graham crackers out of the fridge. And so I'm going to slowly just keep my weight back here, and then I'm going to just transfer heel toe onto the other foot, keeping most of my weight on here until I know that this foot is very stable on whatever surf it is. So it's kind of like a weird, like, I don't know, creepy walk. I don't know. It's cool. So the other thing I'll tell you is that most people are standing where all the trout are. And so you don't have to wade. And I am like the most guilty person of this at all times. I will like get to a river and I will immediately like run into the water and stand in the river, and I'll fish for like 5 minutes, and I'll look around and I'm like, oh, there were a bunch of trout here and now there's not trout here because I scared them all away. So just be careful with where you're standing and try to think about that a little bit. We're going to talk about some holding water and things like that. But really, if you can fish to good water and not have to wade into the stream, you might even be better off. So don't feel like you have to wade by any means. Oh yeah, all the time. That's typically how I'll like approach a river is I'll, come up and I'll look for some like deep hole next to the side and I'll cast straight to that. Try to catch a couple of fish out of there. In an ideal world, I'll catch like 10 or 15, obviously. And then I'll step into that river right after that, after I catch a few fish. So yeah, good question. Oh, hey, look, we're already here. The other thing we kind of have to do is casting. Has everybody casted in here? Anybody not casted in here? That's a better question. A couple people? Cool. So I'll just do a quick down and dirty on casting, trying to take up too much time. I have my very fancy fly rod right here with my very fancy fly line right here. It's very cool. I came up with this about 5 minutes before I left my house today, and here we are. So the biggest thing with fly casting is you're gonna really, a lot of people like to come in here and they'll like shoot it forward like this. I don't know if you guys can see what that line is doing, but it's not great, right? I'm not getting great distance. I'm not getting out there. Really, your fly cast is going to exist between this point and this point. That's all you have to move. You don't have to move it a ton or get it out there. The other thing a lot of people will do is they'll come back here and they'll move it and then they'll move it forward. Do you guys hear that snap? You guys know what's going to happen at that snap if you have a fly on there? There ain't going to be a fly there anymore. And that's a problem. You do need flies to fly fish. I'm just going to break it to you right here. So the biggest thing is I'm looking for is when I come back, I'm going to stop that completely back here. You see how this line straightens out? That's when I know I'm ready to go forward. So when you're starting off, it's actually really nice to watch that line go all the way out and then get it all the way forward. And this is just yarn, but you guys see how much more distance I'm even getting just on this like 5 feet of yarn that I got? It's getting out there a lot more. So just focus on stopping at the back and then coming forward really crisply. I'm kind of proud of my little fly rod yarn thingy. So any other questions on fly casting you guys are struggling with or I can help with at all? While I have my very fancy partner up here. Great. Okay, so quick note on rigging. Like I said, I told you guys you only have to worry about one knot. What's that?
What about casting? Like,
yeah.
I'm seeing some people, they'll kind of like go back and forth one time and then they'll lay it down and then take it for another bit.
Yep. I have never personally caught a fish in the air yet. It's never happened. I'm really hoping for it, but the trout aren't up top. So I'm definitely one of those people. If I can get my cast perfectly in one stroke back and one stroke forward, I'm very happy there, right? That's what I'm really going for. For me, if you ever see me on the water and I'm kind of like casting back and forth, I'm doing one of two things. Number one, I guess one of three things. Number one, I'm drying off my dry fly. So a lot of times I'll do that instead of bringing it all the way in and shaking it. I'll just sit there and I'll do some shadow casts to really get that dry fly just completely dried off just naturally with air. Number two, I'm repositioning. So if I had a really long drift, I might let it drift all the way down behind me, and then I'm going to cast back and cast forward as I kind of walk myself back up to where I'm facing fully upstream where I want to be. I said three things, didn't I? Or I'm getting more distance. So I'm trying to get more fly line out there. I'm not a great double hauler, if you know what that is. I'm sorry. I'm just not there yet. I'm working on it. But I might be trying to get more distance out of that. So I'm actually pulling fly line out from my reel as I come back, and then I'm letting that kind of go out with the distance. But if I get one cast back, one cast forward, that's an ideal world for me. So, yeah. That's very true. It's very true. Watch your back cast. And even like yeah, you could hit somebody as well and you could cat or get into them. But also like around here, you're going to deal with a lot of trees and a lot of logs and rocks and all sorts of stuff behind you as well. And so if that back cast is going too far behind you, you can get snagged on a tree. And it's an inevitability of fly fishing. It's going to happen to you. I promise. It happens to me like 6 times a day. But the goal is to catch fish, not trees. For me, at least. I don't know. I won't assume what you want to do. But do watch that backcast because you can hit people, you could hit logs, you could hit rocks, all sorts of things. So, okay, really quickly, I've got the graphic up here, but I'll kind of draw this out as well. So I told you I only want you tying 1 knot, right? That's kind of the ideal world for me because, again, I'm not smart enough to remember 2 knots. It's very hard. Pray for me. For me, here we're going to have our very fancy fly rod, and our line's coming out of here. So this all here, that's fly line, right? So that's the line that's weighted. It's going to get your cast punching out there. The next thing we're going to have is we're going to have a leader, okay? And there are 2 ways you can connect your leader. Most store-bought leaders today come with a loop on the end of their leader, and you can just loop that through, and you literally take the end of it, you loop it through the loop that it comes with, and you just pull that all the way through, okay? And then it's going to be secure on the fly line. It's not my favorite way of doing things. I'm going to be honest. Number 1, for me, it takes too long. We won't get into it tonight. I do fish some different rigs where I have like a 40-foot long leader, and trying to do like 40 feet of leader through like this tiny hole and like ripping it across on the river is just like not the most efficient way to do things. So nobody hate me for this. The first thing I do when I buy a leader is I clip that loop off. And what I actually do is I tie a clinch knot right here. So I go clinch knot. And that clinch knot's going to just go from the end of my leader, and I'm just going to tie it onto my fly line. It's super easy. Some people have said that it like breaks the end of your fly line. It's not going to float as well. I've been doing it for a while now, and I've never had an issue with that at all. And it just makes my changes that much more quick, so I don't have to sit there and strip all this line through a hole. So now again, 1 knot, right? So end of my leader, I'm going to have a tippet ring right here. And my tippet ring is then going to go to my tippet. And again, what kind of knot am I tying right here? Nice. You guys are learning something. I love this. So yeah, I'm just going to, I guess I don't have to write it again, do I? So I'm going to tie that clinch knot onto both ends from that leader to the tippet ring and from the tippet ring to the tippet. Okay? Yes.
I have a question. So the fly line is connected to the leader.
Yep.
Why are you putting it into the next fly line also leader, or is that okay? Why would you put a tippet there?
So tippet is like a smaller diameter line that's meant to keep the end of this line kind of complete, right? So it's meant to get you tapered down from a thick, heavy fly line all the way down to a pretty small tippet. And then from here, you can just change this section to get smaller tippet so that you can get down to a smaller fly, if that makes sense. So then I'm going to have my fun little, I guess that kind of looks like a fly, right? Nobody shook their head no. It does not look like a fly very well. But again, I'm just going to tie a clinch knot here as well, right? Same thing if I want to attach a dropper, whether I'm going 2 flies, whether I'm going dry fly, whatever I'm doing, I'm just going to attach a clinch knot here, and then I'm going to go down to my other fly there. Yeah. There is, so let me kind of explain like what a clinch knot is, what an improved clinch knot is. So a clinch knot is basically you take the end of your fly line and you're going to put it through the eye of the hook. You're then going to hold just a little gap with the 2 pieces of line. Then you're going to wrap your line around the main line 4 or 5 times. Sometimes if you're going with a smaller diameter, you might want to go like 6, 7 times. And you're going to take the end of it and you're just going to put it through that loop that you kind of held with your fingers. Okay. You can get a much better demonstration than what I'm talking about on YouTube. There's a ton of them. Just watch how to tie a clinch knot. It's very easy. It's very simple. It's very quick. An improved clinch knot then just takes the end of that fly or that tippet material and you put it back through the loop that's created as you turn it back in there. It's great. I have no problems with a clinch knot. I'm not a very patient person again, right? And so already I'm trying to get all this tiny stuff in there. I've never had a clinch knot slip. I've caught some relatively large trout. and I've never had an issue with it slipping. If I was fishing for things like marlin or tarpon or something like that down in the Bahamas, then I might have to worry about it because you're dealing with the fastest fish on the face of the planet. But for me, I just don't worry about that too much. Yeah.
For dropper, are you putting your other non-dropper
For me, I like to put it on the bend of the hook. Reason being, I feel like I have more control over the system that way. I've tried a lot of like tag end ties and all that sort of stuff. I've even tried like there's some different methods where you can like tie your just tip it straight off of here and then get like some backing material and tie it on there. It's very weird. I haven't caught more fish, and I tend to have a harder time doing it, if that makes sense. I feel like I can adjust how long this is more easily. I can kind of go weighted or unweighted. I can change which fly is heavier, which fly is lighter. I just have an easier time doing it that way than tag ends. Tag ends is a great way to do it too. It's just not my preference necessarily.
Because I guess I've tried it before, but I was using the same bowl. So I have like dropper fly.
Yeah. Yep. So you're talking like eye of the hook you're putting it into? Yeah. I've done it that way as well. The one thing that I like about tying it onto the bend is that sometimes I feel like, and this is getting down and dirty a little bit, but if I tie it on the bend or the eye of the hook and I have a heavier weighted fly, then that'll have a tendency to do one of two things. Number one, it'll take my fly and twist it this way. So the hook is then facing up, and then the other fly is like down here. Now, when a trout comes, it's typically going to come from underneath to up top. And so that hook can sometimes bump the outside of their mouth and then get bumped out of them. If it's down below, they come up and swallow it. And then that hook positions itself right in that upper lip. So I get better hookup rates, essentially, is what I'm looking for. The other thing is that if I use an unweighted fly, sometimes that fly will turn 180 degrees. And then the hook is going downstream backwards. So I kind of have like the hook of the fly coming through the water column like this. And when a trout comes to eat it, it's just going to bump the front of that hook if it has a smaller mouth, something like that. So again, it's just about hookups for me on that side of things. That makes sense. Again, super down and dirty. Like you're starting to get into the super nerdy stuff, and I love talking about it. And it's awesome, but that's just kind of what I found for sure. Yeah. 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 It's a whole complicated mess for sure. In general, when you're shopping for your first fly line, get a weight forward fly line. It's going to get you just about everything across the board. You can fish streamers, dry flies, nymphs, everything. When you get into, there's some sinking tip fly lines, there's some weight backwards fly lines, there's all sorts of different things. And really those just become specific tools for specific jobs you're looking at. So yeah, if you're a huge, like if you just want to fish streamers, get a sinking tip fly line. The only thing is like it's going to be very hard for you to fish nymphs or dries with it. If you're going streamers only, then it's a great solution. But cool. Is anybody okay with going slightly over? Great. I love it. Like I said, I'll talk about trout all night, so you guys are stuck with me. I'm sorry. They do close the store down eventually, so we might have to watch out for that, but it'll be okay. Don't just stay here all night. It'll be awesome. It'll be awesome. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about finding fish. We're already coming to 8 o'clock, so I'll kind of breeze through this a little bit. But obviously, right, like we have all these skills and the rigging and all these sorts of things, and that's great. But it's really frustrating when you can't find fish, right? And I spent a long time fly fishing as like a young boy who didn't want to listen to my dad, fishing random water and getting nowhere. So we're going to talk a little about the key water that you really need to look out for, okay? So really there's 3 water types that you should be looking for in a river system. The first is going to be riffles. A lot of people skip riffles. Do not be the person that skips riffles. Riffles are highly oxygenated, which is key for trout living in them. So keep an eye out for that. But they're going to look just like this. These could be in huge rivers. These could be in small rivers. These could be in all sorts of things. But this is a great kind of water system that is going to be the most productive in terms of having feeding trout. Feeding trout are going to move into here to catch things all the time. Okay. Yep, exactly. So underneath here, there's a bunch of rocks, and so it's relatively shallow in here. But if you cast a line in there, there's a bunch of really neat holding water underneath all this that you would never think was there. And so it's just rippling over these rocks, and all these trout go in there. Most of the bugs that they're eating are resting on those rocks, and the faster current is actually pushing them off of those rocks into the feeding columns. Is what's happening. Yep. Typically, I catch them like behind the rocks, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. I've got a closer up picture we can look at. But typically, it's going to be behind all those little rocks and those riffles. So we'll take a look at that. The next one's going to be runs. Runs are riffles, but deeper now. That's it. It's going to be typically bigger boulders like this. And so you're going to see these coming through. There's going to be a little bit more water depth. And so this is kind of the same thing I'm talking about, where we want to get deep down into it relatively quickly. So runs are going to be huge for you. It's going to be maybe a little bit slower moving water, not quite as quick, but still relatively fast water. And the last type we're going to have is pools. If you're targeting big trout, and if you're especially targeting brown trout, pools are key for you. These are going to be deeper sections of water. You're going to see this color change right here, where it's very black. This is going to be where you want to cast right here, because number one, that trout is hiding in the shadow of that. And number two, it's very deep. Biggest thing with this, two best ways, you're either going to want to fish it with a heavily weighted nymph so that you can get deep down in there really quickly, or you're going to want to fish it with a streamer and give it a lot of time to sink down into this water. And then you're going to strip it back through, and it just gets the trout pissed off because it's more territorial than anything. That trout's just going to be super mad, and it's going to chase that bait fish that's coming through. So now, transition zones, and this is kind of what he was talking about there. Transition zones is the key to catching trout, right? You're going to look for these bigger bodies of waters and those riffles, runs, and pools, but it's really those transition zones inside of those sections that is really going to be key for you. So the first one you have is ahead of a run, right? So right here, we have this riffly sort of run right here. A lot of trout are going to hang out right here. The reason they do that is there's a ton of water that just got pushed through here. And so there's a ton of food that's now pushing through here that's gone from very deep system where maybe it was hard for them to get. And now all of a sudden that water type is cut down into maybe a quarter of the size, right? And so they're going to sit right here. They're going to wait for all that trout or all that food, and it's going to come right to them. Okay, so heads of runs is key. Tail outs, just on the other side, is also going to be key, right? So you kind of got this nice riffle right here that I showed earlier. And as it comes out into this section right here, it's kind of tailing out into this kind of softer section of water. And this is going to be a great place where maybe a trout was feeding, maybe it got tired and kicked out of this section. And so then it pushed down here. And again, all of this food that's getting pushed off of these rocks is now coming straight down to that trout. So it's just like an all-you-can-eat buffet, just coming right to them. Seams, this is kind of what you were talking about here that I want to talk about. When you're in one of those riffles or those runs, trout are going to hang out in the seams. Who in here loves to jog and eat burgers at the same time? That's good for you, man. Maybe we need to hang out. That sounds awesome. No, a lot of people, like we're lazy, right? Trout are the same exact way. So instead of hanging out here where all the food is, they're going to hang out here, and they're going to wait for this food to come right down this seam, right? Because all this food is getting kicked in right over here, and it's coming down kind of this wider section, right? So you really want to cast right to the inside part of this seam, and all of these trout right here that are waiting in this slow section are going to feed on everything coming right down through here. Does that make sense? Seams are probably the most important thing for you to focus on, especially here. We have a lot of pocket water. We have a lot of riffles, a lot of runs, things like that. And these seams right here are going to be the number one key to your fishing. Okay. Now talking about pocket water a little bit closer as well. In here, you're going to have a ton of stuff. Does this look very familiar to anybody around here? If you guys have been out of the rivers? This is very characteristic of a Thompson or a Poudre River. So you're going to have a ton of these boulders. And all of these spots right here that we have circled, those are all going to be spots where trout are going to hold. Now there's a lot in here, right? And sometimes like this water right here is maybe 6 inches deep. This water right here is maybe a couple of feet deep, right? So the trout is hanging out at the bottom of that. And so that's where I talk about that. You got to really get that fly down quickly. So we're going to try to tie on some Paragon, something like that, that can really drop down to that water column really fast. As you guys start getting nerdier and like your entomology and stuff, as you maybe start tying your own flies, playing with bead size can be really, really fun because I might have the same size hook and I might switch it down to, it's a size 16 with a 3.5 millimeter bead. I might up that to a 3.8 millimeter bead, and now all of a sudden that fly then drops quicker. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I am not a split shot hater. There are a lot of people in the fly fishing industry that are, but split shot can be huge, especially when you're wanting to fish smaller flies in deep water like that. Putting on a little bit of split shot doesn't never hurt anybody. I have a tendency to go more for weighted flies, just because I've had a lot of like split shot like fly off of my tippet and things like that. But it's definitely a good way to do things if you can get it there. Yeah, I always go in front of the fly, and kind of my thought process is I want the split shot to actually hit the bottom of the river, and then it's going to invert my system a little bit to where that split shot is dragging along the bottom, and the flies can then be completely unweighted up top, right? I don't think I've talked about this yet, but the goal that we're trying to get to is to do a dead drift. We want that fly to go completely untouched by us, right? And so that can actually be a really great way to do things because that's going to take all of our influence of holding the fly line off of the flies, and they can float super naturally. So yeah, good question. Now, one of the coolest, most like mesmerizing pieces of water ever, undercut banks. If you can find one of these, never tell anyone where it is ever, unless you want your awesome hole to now become the sweetheart hole, and now you're going to be holding hands with everybody there. Okay. Undercut banks can be super fun. You'll have this kind of nice, slow section of water where that water, especially against the outside curve, has cut underneath the bank of the river. And now you can float like a dry fly or like a terrestrial is huge right here. If you float like a hopper pattern, these huge brown trout will come from underneath that undercut bank to come up and eat those flies. And it's one of the coolest things ever. It is super fun. So it's a lot of information. I kind of put it here in this oversimplified graphic that if you ever see a river that has all of this in this small of an area, I'm very happy for you. And again, never tell anybody where it is. But this is typically how your water is going to run here. You're going to have the head of your run right here, and that water is kind of coming from this vast zone straight back here. These trout are actually going to be faced the opposite direction. That's my fault. And they're going to be waiting for all of this food to come right out as it drops down. Then you're going to have this nice pool right here where it's good resting water, and those fish are going to hit straight right there. We're going to either want to get a nymph really far down underneath here, or we're going to want to strip a streamer right through there and get those trout coming after the streamer. Tail outs are going to be awesome for kind of that dry fly zone because those bugs will actually have the ability to come up and hatch up here, and so they'll kind of hatch here, and the fish will then kind of assault them on the end of this as those bugs are kind of getting into the shallower water right before they take off. And then you can kind of have this nice pocket water right here that's kind of a refuge from this current here behind this boulder. So oversimplification, but hopefully it gets the point across. Any questions on fishing water or anything? You guys feel like you can go out and find trout? Cool. Just text me and let me know where they are, please. Last thing I want to leave you guys with here today is just a little note on fishing ethics, and this is where I can get very soapboxy. Trout are my favorite animal on this planet. I'm very protective of them, and I care very deeply about them, and so there are some kind of ethical things we need to kind of talk about in terms of fly fishing, especially for beginners. First off is water temperature is really key to trout. The higher water temperature gets, the lower the oxygen in the water, okay? Trout already live in kind of a oxygen dense zone, but when that drops, it's harder for them to breathe. And so especially in the summertime, this is something you have to worry about. I carry a thermometer on me at all times. I actually record temperatures for every trout that I catch. That's more of me being a nerd. It's okay. But in the summertime, it's really great to look at. I kind of like to call 65 to 68 degrees. That's like the danger zone where it's like, we should probably think about like safe handling practices and things like that, keeping the trout in the water as much as possible, not taking them out and doing like these big grip and grin photos, anything like that. But once you get past 68 degrees, this is my hard stop of do not fish for trout anymore. Everybody always sends me these photos of, hey, they drop trout out of like airplanes to go straight into like alpine lakes. Those are stock trout. Again, I want to talk about wild trout. When you get above 68 degrees, the oxygen level is very low. You're going to think everything is fine. You're going to get this trout back in the water. It's going to swim away fine. You're actually going to get a delayed mortality in most cases. Some studies have shown that like 75% of trout that are caught above 68 degrees have delayed mortality and will die within the next 2 hours because they now can't get enough oxygen into their system. So something to consider. That doesn't mean don't fish in the summertime. There's lots of other things you can do. You can go high alpine lakes where it'll stay below 68 degrees. For us here, we actually don't have to worry about the water getting above 68 degrees very much because we're pretty high, right? We're pretty high up here. And so that's kind of a consideration for you. Or just go fish for something different, right? Like we have some great like carp water and stuff around here actually that can actually be a ton of fun. I don't know what you guys think about carp, but I caught my first one on a fly rod last year and it was an absolute blast. So I'm now not a carp hater, but there's some other things you can do there. In terms of safe handling tactics, the biggest thing that I want you guys to worry about here is just keeping your hands wet. A lot of people will kind of do the like scoop the fish out of the water with their net, pull them all the way up out of the water, and then with dry hands, grab them, pull them off, and you'll have like this like sticky residue on your hand. Yeah, that's the trout's like protective slime layer that keeps them alive. So that's a bad thing to have on your hands. And the easiest way you can not do that is you just put your net and you keep it like floating on the water. And then you just wet your hands in the river and then hold the trout and you'll be totally fine. Just get your hands wet. If you fish in like the winter or the fall and your hands get cold, number one thing I recommend is like wear a pair of like wool gloves. And then I put a pair of like doctor's surgeon's gloves over top of those. And number one, they keep my hands dry, but they also help me where I can get those wet and then hold the trout with them and it's not going to damage their skin. Last thing on here, I already talked a little bit about the net of having a nylon net instead of, a silicone net instead of a nylon net. So again, it's going to just protect that trout skin so you don't take off the slime layer. The other thing that I'm going to always recommend, and I will die on this hill, barbless hooks are going to be easier for you and the trout. Most hooks in fly shops nowadays actually, unfortunately, are still sold with barbs in them. It's just harder to get out of the trout. It's harder on you. It's harder on them. And it can cause a lot of delayed mortality just by holding those trout out of the water as you're trying to like finagle with this barbed hook out of the mouth. You can still buy those flies out the fly shops, but just take your little forceps and you just pinch that barb down a little bit. It just becomes a small bump. It becomes way easier. I buy all of my hooks barbless, so they don't have any barb on them. It's way easier for me. Like I've even gotten, sometimes I can do it where if I have a trout that's like, I don't know, slightly smaller or something, maybe I'm not going to take a picture, maybe it's in the summer, I want to keep them wet. I can actually like loop my fly out of the trout's mouth without taking them out of the water at all, because that barbless hook will just slip out. But I have never once lost a fish because I've used the barbless hook. Never done it. As long as you keep tension on the flies you're fighting the trout, you will not lose a fish on a barbless hook. I promise.
All right. That's all for this one. Thanks for spending time with us here on Flying Trout. If you enjoyed today's episode, you can find us on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube, or head over to the Flying Trout webpage where every article you hear on this podcast lives in full. Whether you're fishing a mountain creek, walking a ridge at first light, or throwing streamers in your local pond, get out when you can. Fish hard, hunt hard, and until next time, see you out there.